I'm Dr. John Worsham. I'm a clinical psychologist, and we're at the Texas Transportation Museum in San Antonio, Texas, and we're on board the McKeever Pullman sleeping car built in 1924. And I'm here with some very lovely ladies who are going to introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Robin Ford-Dillard. I was born and raised in Chicago, Illinois. My dad was a Pullman Porter back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. I currently live here in San Antonio, have been here 40 plus years, 3 children, 1 husband, a dog, and a slew of best friends. And I have a twin sister.
Hi, I'm Lark Ford. I'm the twin sister to Robin Ford-Dillard. I've moved to San Antonio after serving in the military for close to 34 years, and right now I'm one of the professors at the University of Texas Health Science Center, now called UT Health San Antonio, in the School of Nursing. I live vicariously through Robin's 3 children, her dog, and her husband as my brother-in-law. And again, my father was David Ford, who was a Pullman Porter, as Robin said, for about 4 decades. And truly, we've had great stories that we can share based on our life and time with our dad on a train.
And that's part of our purpose in being together, is to get some of those stories, because the Texas Transportation Museum is very interested in developing an understanding of the history of the Pullman Porter and their descendants. Now, this car has been at the Texas Transportation Museum since 1983. And over the years, we realized as time went by that fewer and fewer people understood what a Pullman car was or what a Pullman Porter was. And we felt like we've reached a point now where we really need to teach people about that history. We want to use this car to do that. So let's start out by telling some stories about your dad. When did he start, and what railroad, if you know?
I know because we were born and raised in Chicago. He worked out of the Chicago Pullman Porter station. He traveled, I want to say, 1 week, 2 weeks out of town, 2 weeks in town. He did a lot of traveling to the West Coast. He went up to Seattle, Washington, and would do a turnaround trip and come back to Chicago. He made it possible for my sister and I to go almost every summer on a Pullman Porter train to St. Louis to stay with my grandmother. And we traveled a couple of times to Los Angeles, California on the train. The historical part of it is that we loved sitting in the seats and smelling the dining car and wishing that one day we could be in one of the sleeper cars. We were young, 5, 6, 7, 8. I think we did it until we were about 10 years old. And that was the primary mode of transportation that we did out of Chicago to either Missouri or to the West Coast.
But you had some wonderful trips.
Oh, we did. It's just, the fascination of going between cart to cart as you walk. And some of the seats that we're sitting in right now are very similar to what we're used to. But the fascinating part was looking out the window and seeing the countryside during the daytime. And of course, many of our trips were overnight trips, so we might see the nighttime. But just waking up and, as a little child, just enjoying going to the diner.
I remember all that too. I started going on trains when I was probably 3 or 4 years old. And I remember the ding, 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 ding as you went by, and all the interesting things you see that you wouldn't see any other way, like going by train. And my mom and I traveled by train a good bit, and we were well taken care of by the Pullman Porter. I always admired their attitude and the way they were able to deal with people in such an effective and helpful way. And I know it was a very difficult job. I didn't know how hard it was until I grew up and heard some of the stories and read some of the books about that. But I know that they worked very hard, and usually they were supporting their families in very important ways.
They just say, George, will you bring me or get me a glass of water or drink or something like that? but didn't cause no confusion, nothing like that. I didn't pay no attention.
And this gentleman sat on my station, and we waiters have a badge with our names on the badge. So he looked up at me and said, "Jimmy, you look just like a nigger I met in Cincinnati. Are you that nigger?" I said, "No, sir, I'm not that nigger. How can I serve you?" I always will remember he ordered steak. That was the most expensive meal on the B&O at that time. It cost $1.50. I said, "I'll serve you." He said, "You look like a nice nigger. Here, take $10. I said, "No, sir, I won't take your $10. I'll wait on you. I will not take your $10 because I will not allow you to buy my integrity for $10.
The Pullman Porters recognized the extent to which they were being exploited, but those who complained would be fired.
A lot of men got fired fighting and trying to defend yourself. You can't defend yourself.
I think my father was the epitome of customer service because he knew how to provide service with a smile, with professionalism, with a sense of pride in what he was doing. He was not a college graduate, but he was so intelligent, and he certainly was able to make it possible for my sister and I to recognize the fact it was not a matter if we wanted to go to college, it was a matter of which college we were going to go to support our dreams and our aspirations for higher education. I also remember when he passed, the photograph that was passed on to us with him in his Pullman Porter uniform. Once again, a uniform that was polished, and he was proud to be in that uniform, standing by that train, and that's how he looked every day when he left the home, and every time he returned home, he was in his uniform, and he took pride in making sure that it was always intact.
I think that's what caused me to get into the military. It's the discipline. It's truly the responsibility that goes with it and the pride of what you're doing. And when Robin was talking about the uniform, to this day, I still wear a starch white uniform in nursing, and I recognize that based on how my father was dressed in his uniform. Never a wrinkle that's there. So those are things that those are values that rub off on you, and you never forget.
That's right.
I remember how he polished his shoes. I remember how he hung his clothes. I remember how he was dressed, and he was dressed even not in uniform. He was always groomed immaculately. I can recall that now that I think about it, and it just makes me, and how he would go and get his hair cut, and he disciplined us a little bit differently than our mother did. You know, it was one of those, if he told you don't do something, okay, I'm not going to do it. I would challenge my mother if she said don't do anything, so I'm going to see what's she going to do. And she did it, and so I said I won't do that again. But that's it.
So he had an authority about it.
Yes, he did. When he was in town, and if we got sick, I don't ever remember him ever not going to work. You know, calling in sick. And once again, very, very young, but I knew when he was in town, out of town. But when my sister and I ever got sick in elementary school, he would not drive up to the school to pick us up. He would walk up to the school and make us walk home with him.
Wow.
Yes, so it was a true test of how ill we really were.
That's it. Robin did mention she had 3 children. Her youngest son is named after my father. His middle name is David. And right now, Derek's life is very similar based on what he's doing. 2 weeks on, where he works with a Shell oil company, and 2 weeks off. And it reminds me of my father. 2 weeks on for travel, 2 weeks off. And that kind of says, like, it's a full circle that's going through. So you're living the life where you can see things come back again.
There was a brotherhood among the Pullman Porters. because when my sister and I would travel as 6 and 7 years old, we'd be situated in a seat very similar to this. And even if my father was not on the train, his Pullman Porter brothers were saying, these are David's kids, make sure they get to where they're supposed to go. And they were checking on us to make sure we were doing okay and making sure we were supposed to be where we were supposed to be.
Did your dad ever talk to you about some of his work with the union, with the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters?
No, I cannot, because we were so young.
Mm-hmm.
And if he had those conversations, he would have had it with my mother, or he would have had it with
His
brothers, Uncle Frank, Uncle Bill, because they got together on the weekends when he was in town. It was a tight-knit family. Every Sunday we were over at an aunt's house having some type of Sunday fellowship when he was in town, and every Christmas we were at a family member's home on my father's side of the family, and then every summer we were in St. Louis with my mother's side of the family. So I never heard any disgruntled comment about what he was doing or what was happening all the time that I was growing up.
Well, that's good.
Yes.
You probably are aware about the history of A. Philip Randolph and his long efforts to create the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters.
Yes.
This low salary, the long hours, the idea that if they broke any one of the hundreds of George Pullman's rules in his rule book, that they could be fired, this led them repeatedly to try to unionize. The Porters were so discouraged, they went to a man who had never been a Pullman Porter and decided to hire him to run their union. This guy had a track record of abject failure. He had tried 4 times to organize unions, and each time he had failed. He was an avowed socialist. He was everything that you would think would guarantee failure. He was a man named A. Philip Randolph. He spent 12 long years battling to organize a union. He watched his top lieutenants be fired. They tried bribery, intimidation, and this guy, nobody quite understood how persistent he was and how much the Porters had faith in him. Everybody knows about the famous March on Washington in 1963. That was a march where Martin Luther King gave his I Have a Dream speech. What people may not know is that the original March on Washington was scheduled 22 years before, and it was organized by A. Philip Randolph, and Randolph called it off because Franklin Roosevelt agreed to pass the Fair Employment Practices Act.
Roosevelt backed it, and with that backing, he essentially forced the Pullman Company to capitulate and recognize the union.
12 long years to the day that he started his drive to organize a union, the Pullman Company came in, they shocked him, they shocked everybody around this long negotiating table by saying, we give up, we will sign. And it was the first ever trade union for African Americans in
The
America.
Pullman Porter would have never been where he was, where he's at today with President Randolph. No way. Better hours, better benefits, and a place to stay when you're out on the road.
Although they were considered servants, I don't think that that's any accident that they were able to form a labor union.
This is important, and this is history worth preserving.
Yes, it is.
And once again, the train should not go away. It is a key mode of transportation, and I think every young person needs to experience a train ride.
I do too, and I hope that we're getting back to having more support for passenger trains.
Yes.
Almost other countries now are helping support their own passenger trains, and they're way ahead of us now. So I hope that we'll be focused more on that, because you can move more people for less energy in a train,
Exactly.
for one thing. And of course, it's just a nice way to move.
That's exactly
It may get us back to talking with one another. And so,
Excuse me.
so when we realize that we need to spend some time learning how to communicate again and realize that we are a mobile society. Train may be the way of doing it, because if they have seats like this, you're forced to look someone in their face, eye to eye, and if we're sitting next to one another, you're forced to turn and look at someone in their eye, and that's called conversation.
Yes.
But this is wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. I need to send a text to my wife to tell her that I will, in fact, come home.
Sorry.